Hi all, thanks for coming back to watch episode 8, part of the odyssey of getting my Sleeping Beauty Jaguar Mk2 back on the road. In this episode I'm going to show you about what I did to get the fuel tank clean, and it's a messy, horrible job. But there might be a few tips there that people might find useful. Some of them I got from the internet when I was trying to work out what to do. So I hope you find this interesting. Happy watching. So because this car's 59 years old or thereabouts, and I haven't even tried to hand crank it yet, I think what I better do is have a look at draining the fuel tank. The fuel would have been in there for 15 years because that's how long the car's been sitting, and this is a particularly horrible job. So luckily the fuel tank has a plug underneath. You can see that there. And it's about a, I think it's a 13/16 nut on the bottom. Now I've actually drained the fuel tank already, but I'll show you what I did, and whether it's the perfect way to do it or not, I don't know, but it seems to have worked. So what I did is I put a container under this plug here, so this is where the plug is. Put a 13/16 spanner on there, loosen it off, and so that just comes out like that, and then the fuel comes out the bottom of the tank. And you can see on the bottom of the or the top of the plug, there's this gauze filter. Now that looked pretty awful, I have to say, when I took it out, so I gave that a pretty good clean. So the pipe that takes the fuel to the engine actually goes in that hole. So when the fuel is pumped or sucked out of the tank, the fuel has to go through the gauze first and then down to the engine. So yeah, so what came out of the tank was pretty awful. It was sort of black, horrible sludge. This is probably the third bucket of muck that came out of the tank. Certainly the first one was just horrible. So I'll just pop that back in again. And I'll show you what else I did in a minute. Nope. So this doesn't need to be super tight, but so that's that. So the other thing I did during this whole process is that I located the float valve setup, which is down this hole. So in the boot under the carpet there's a plug, so it's about a foot in from the back of the car on the left hand side. There's a cover which I've loosened off already, and there's the fuel sender unit, and there's two wires that come into it, and then there's an earth wire. So what I did is I undid the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, which are just screwdriver screws. And so I've already undone those screws, and the whole thing sort of lifts out, and there's a float on the bottom of this, so I'll show you that. Now I haven't cleaned this, but that float goes up and down and connects through the wires to the gauge to tell you whether you've got a full tank of fuel, half tank of fuel, or no fuel. No fuel is probably most likely in these, the rate that they use them. So I've got the float out, and now you can see down into the bottom of the tank. Well, you can't really hear, but it's down there. So to clean the tank out, I also pulled the fuel filler cap off, So basically what I had was the open fuel filler, the open tank fuel sender unit hole, and I drained the fuel out, so basically the tank was empty. When I drained the fuel out of the fuel drain into a bucket, there was probably about an inch of sludge in the bottom of the bucket by the time I finished. It was just truly awful. It really was just black sludge. I'm not too sure what it would be, probably a mixture of corrosion and who knows what else, but it was disgusting. And the stale fuel, which must have been in there for the stale fuel, which must have been in there for 15 years, really smelt bad. It was just awful. Completely unlike normal fuel. So anyway, so I'm glad I did that. But when I looked down into the hole, I mean it's clean now, but when I looked down into the hole, it was still full of muck in the bottom. So there are various theories about how to clean fuel tanks. There's all sorts of people that if you take the tank out, that you can take a tank too and get it all professionally done and blah blah. Now, I was fairly confident because I put a screwdriver down into the tank and the sludge was all sort of fairly moist. It wasn't sort of hard and sort of glued on. So there are some people that have cleaned tanks out in situ. So I thought I'd give that a go. Now, maybe I did the wrong thing, maybe I did the right thing, but it seems to have worked. So with the, I took the fuel filler cap off and I got the hose pipe that connects with the garden tap. I've got the hose pipe with the nozzle on the end of it and just squirted out as hard as I could squirt with just the hose, and that certainly dislodged pretty much everything, and of course that all just flows out the filler hole, the drain hole. So then I saw some guy on the internet suggested putting some washing detergent down into the tank with water. So I put the drain plug back in again and just put some, well, I actually used wool washing detergent, which is eucalyptus and whatever else is in it. And I just poured some in the bottom there and filled the tank up about 20%. Let that sit for a little while, drained that out, and I think that probably soaked into the detergent, probably soaked into the muck that was left. So I left it for a couple of hours, and then what I did is I got the hose again, undid the drain plug, got the hose again, and gave it a good squirt. Now, in this picture you can see the hose pipe going in through the fuel filler and my tray under the drain plug of the fuel tank. It's a really messy job and I had to do this over and over, but it was worth it in the end. I don't know if you can see what it looks like now, but there's no sign of any black sludge down there. It actually looks pretty clean, and I don't know if that's sort of a little bit of surface rust in the tank or not, but the tank certainly feels solid, and now it looks almost clean as a whistle. So what I did then, it was a beautiful Adelaide summer day yesterday. It was about 33 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, probably 80-ish. And so I left the garage door open and I left the filler cap off. I left the sender unit cap off with the sender unit out, and I left the drain plug open, and I let the car sit there all day after I'd given it a final rinse with the hose pipe to get any last amount of soap out, and it seems to have dried off quite nicely actually. So where we're at to now is that I cleaned the filter, which was on the end of the drain plug, and that was just full of black muck as well. So that's gone back in. shortly I'll put the fuel sender unit in. I just want to check that that's working properly. I'll give that a bit of a clean too. And then we'll put some fuel in it. So my car's all been nicely retrimmed in the trunk, or the boot as we would call it. I just want to have a quick look at the fuel pump. So the fuel pump's on the left hand side of the car. Now I don't know if this is an original fuel pump or not. So it looks like when the car was all pulled to bits, someone labelled the wires, but of course the writing's all gone now. So basically, it's a sort of a plastic looking pump, so it might not be the original one. I don't know, but I don't care. When the ignition was on, I could hear the fuel pump sort of clicking, so that's generally a good sign, might mean it works. So then under the bonnet, what I did is I disconnected the flexible fuel hose from the fuel filter and connected up a long piece of hose to that. So what I wanted to do is just run some fuel through from the tank through to the engine bay, then out the black pipe into a tray to see what I had, and that all worked quite well. There was still a fair bit of junk coming out, and you can see in that tray there that it's sort of black, black fine particles. Then I thought, right, what am I going to do about this? Because there did seem to be a bit of surface rust in the tank. So I got on the internet, and there's all sorts of fancy techniques and theories. But there was one guy who cleaned his fuel tank out with vinegar, just household vinegar. So I went down to the supermarket and bought 10 bottles of just household vinegar. So it's about 10, that's 20 litres. And what I did is I filled the tank up again with, after I drained the petrol out of the tank, I filled the tank up again with 20 litres of vinegar and some water as well, and just let that sit for a few hours. So then what I did is I drained the vinegar and the water out of the tank, let it all dry, put some new fuel in, and went through the whole process again. It's certainly a lot better, but I'm still having to replace the fuel filter every couple of 100 kilometres as the final debris comes through the lines and sorts itself out. So thanks for persevering through that video. It took me ages to work out what I had to do, and I didn't really want to take the fuel tank out, and I think I've sort of done a reasonable job. We'll see how things go. Thanks for watching. I'm glad I got the fuel tank cleaned and dried yesterday. It was a beautiful 33-degree day, and today it's windy, maybe 19 degrees, cold and horrible.